Half a Push is a story of a young lady that did not give up until locks found her by name Amma. Amma learned early that buttons were not promises. On the morning the city felt particularly heavy, she stood at the roadside with heat crawling up her back and dust settling into the folds of her skirt. The pedestrian light blinked red, steady and uncaring. She pressed the crossing button once. Nothing happened. She pressed it again, harder this time, as if pressure could convince machinery to feel sympathy. Cars sped past, splashing puddles that had no business still existing after 3 dry weeks. Someone shouted prices for oranges. A bus coughed black smoke like an old man refusing rest. Amma pressed the button again. "Oh, auntie," a boy said beside her. He couldn't have been more than 12. He balanced a bag of sachet water on his shoulder like a crown. "That one doesn't work." She looked at him. "Then why is it still there?" The boy smiled, showing a gap where a tooth should have been. "So people won't lose hope too fast." That almost made her laugh. Almost. She crossed when the cars slowed on their own, clutching the brown folder under her arm. The folder was thin, but it felt heavy. It always did. Inside were papers that had traveled more than she had, applications, letters, photocopies of documents that proved too much and never enough. The office she was going to sat behind a gate painted white and blue, colors meant to inspire trust. Posters covered the walls inside, smiling faces, open hands, words like empowerment and support stretched into bold fonts. Amma sat on a plastic chair and watched the fan wobble overhead as if it might fall at any moment but never quite did. The woman at the desk typed without looking at her. "You said you're an orphan," the woman said finally. "Yes," Amma replied. "Both parents?" "Yes." "When did they pass?" Amma named the years. They sounded distant even to her own ears. The woman nodded, fingers still moving. "Do you have proof?" Amma felt something tighten in her chest. "Proof of what?" "Death certificates. Letters from guardians. Any surviving family members who can confirm." Amma stared at the desk, at a small crack shaped like a river splitting in two. "If I had family," she said carefully, "I wouldn't be sitting here." The typing stopped. The woman looked up, her expression polite and closed, like a door with good manners. "We receive many cases. We must follow procedure." Amma nodded. She had learned this language well. Procedure was a way of saying not today without guilt. "We'll call you," the woman added. Amma thanked her. She always did. Gratitude was expected, even when nothing had been given. Outside, the sun hit her like an accusation. She leaned against the wall and opened her folder. Her papers looked tired. Corners bent. Ink fading. At the back was a single sheet she had written herself. The title sat at the top in careful handwriting. The Button. She had written it late one night by candlelight when the power had gone and stayed gone. It was an idea, a story, maybe a question. She wasn't sure yet. She only knew it wouldn't leave her alone. People always said, "Just push. Keep trying. Don't give up." Nobody talked about what happened when the thing you were pushing was broken. Amma walked home through streets that carried their own memory of refusal. She passed schools she couldn't afford, houses she had cleaned, offices she had waited in. At home, her room was small but honest. A mattress on the floor. A shelf of borrowed books. A window that let in noise and light and other people's lives. She wrote at night. Not because she thought it would save her, but because it was the only place she wasn't refused. On paper, things could fail without shame. Characters could push buttons that sparked or shocked or exploded. They could push until their hands hurt and still stand up. In her story, there was a woman who pressed a button meant to open a door. The button lit halfway and stayed there, humming, undecided. Everyone watching told her she hadn't pressed hard enough. Nobody checked the wiring. Amma began telling pieces of the story out loud to anyone who would listen. A neighbor. A shop owner. What if the system is broken, she asked them one evening, and we keep blaming the person pressing? Some people shrugged. Some laughed. One woman nodded slowly, as if something long unspoken had finally found a chair to sit on. Amma didn't stop pressing in real life either. She applied again. And again. Sometimes she changed the wording. Sometimes she didn't. Sometimes she walked for hours to be told a program had ended last month. Sometimes she was told she was strong, as if strength paid rent. Each refusal added weight, but it also added shape. She began to see patterns. The same smiles. The same phrases. The same doors that opened just enough to be called open. One afternoon, she returned to the crossing light. The button was still there. Scratched now. A little loose. She pressed it. The red man flickered. Green tried to appear, stuttered, then stopped halfway. Cars slowed in confusion. A driver shouted. Someone laughed. Amma stood there, watching the light tremble between states. Halfway. She realized then that halfway was not nothing. It was proof that something inside still responded. The problem wasn't effort. It was repair. Weeks later, she was invited, not called, to speak at a small gathering. No banners. No sponsors. Just chairs arranged in a circle and people who had been told no often enough to recognize the sound of it. Amma spoke plainly. About buttons. About systems. About being told to push without being given a map of what worked and what didn't. She spoke about being an orphan, not as tragedy, but as fact. A starting point, not a conclusion. When she finished, there was no applause at first. Then someone clapped. Then another. A man approached her afterward and asked if she had written it down. Yes, she said. I'm still writing. Good, he replied. Some of us need to read it. Amma walked home that night lighter than she had in a long time. Nothing had magically changed. She still didn't have the help she had asked for. The next morning, she stood at the crossing again. Habit, maybe. Hope, definitely. She pressed the button. This time, the light turned green. Cars stopped. People crossed. Amma waited a moment, watching others move through the space she had helped unlock simply by insisting. Then she stepped forward. Halfway, she thought, was never failure. But it was a movement. That's the end of the little Amma the village girl.